Hello and welcome. I am Dr. Lara, a clinical pharmacist specializing in functional medicine, as well as a certified yoga teacher and Reiki master. I run a truly integrative health coaching practice encompassing functional medicine lab testing, yoga and meditation, and a sprinkling of Reiki energy medicine. Join me here on Light Body Radio to break through your health plateau and come into alignment with your natural vitality. Hello and welcome to Light Body Radio. I'm your host, Dr. Lara May. And today I have with me Marjorie Nass, and we are going to talk about menopause and perimenopause and how, yes, your hormones are important, but they're not the end all and be all when it comes to addressing all the crazy stuff that goes on during this time period for women. So she and her journey is rooted in personal transformation. She embarked on a path of healing that led her away from the pressures and confines of corporate life to discover that yoga and Ayurveda were the key to her healing path. So she healed her health challenges through holistic practices that included yoga, nutrition, movement, and breath work. And she learned to manage the pressures of life. And that seemed to be the crucial component to really recover her physical and emotional health. And so she, at this point, has been dedicating herself over the last 25 years to helping women also figure this whole puzzle out. So welcome. I'm really happy to have you.
Thank you I'm so happy to be here.
So let's start with your journey. I want to hear about that and, what brought you to even deciding to, be in this specialty area of practice.
I've been thinking more and more about it, and it actually started earlier than I thought it did, because when I was 19, I was going through a cycle of UTIs and I wasn't getting better. And I was going on all sorts of antibiotics and just doing, at 19, doing what the doctors told me to do. And I was having all kinds of side effects. So I actually, even at that young age, back in the olden days, read books about what to do. And just by following a few really holistic things, I got off of that antibiotic yeast infection cycle. And so I was always very curious. And as I continued to have other issues, I was still like doing what the doctor said, but also like trying to educate myself. And, I got caught up in life and the corporate life and had a very, very stressful job. I grew up in New York City. It was that New York City pace and all of that. And then, emotionally, physically, things just really came to a head and nothing was really helping me. So I discovered yoga. And immediately I felt better with yoga. In fact, I was reading about your journey. And so I had terrible IBS from the time I was, a teenager. And very quickly that got so much better through just the yoga. And then I started incorporating more of the breath practices as well as the physical practices. And yoga has a whole wellness branch called Ayurveda. And if you're not familiar with that word, it just means science or knowledge of life. And I like to say it's like a manual of how to live in a body, and it's thousands of years old. So when I added that to the picture, I was already teaching yoga by this point. When I started adding that to the picture, my health really, really transformed. So I began bringing that into my teaching, my workshops, my retreats. And I went through perimenopause and then menopause, and it's 10 years now since I've been in menopause, really without any issues at all. And that was so unlike so many of the people that I know. So when I started bringing all the things that I had been doing into my practices, my clients started having an easier time. If they hadn't had any symptoms, they continued through with very few symptoms. If they were having symptoms, we were able to relieve those, not by a focus on hormones, but about lifestyle and how we're living in our body.
Yeah, I think we don't really give enough credit to the impact that stress has on our bodies and our life. And so, I'm a big proponent of, one of the first things I address with my clients too is stress. What's your stress level? Like from where I'm focusing in my practice currently is diabetes and pre-diabetes, but that's hormones too.
100%.
So, like, yes, we might not be focusing on a hormone replacement regimen like a Western medicine or even some other types of natural medicine might, but that doesn't mean that assessing that stress level can't help you also rebalance your hormones, no matter where you are in the course of life. Because one of the things that I've realized too, that I'm sure you did as well, is, and like you said, when you realize that really this journey started when you were 19, like, yeah, how much stress have we put on ourselves at such an early age, and we continue that, and then no wonder our bodies are all out of whack and screwed up.
It's a very good, way of putting it. And I want to say that, of course, we're all under so much stress, but how are we handling it? And
Right.
so there are some people that are thriving in very, very, very busy lives, and they're happy. That, how we're enjoying our life, that also affects our stress levels. And so we look at everything. And as we're entering, perimenopause can start as early as your late 30s, and when hormones are, when your sex hormones are really starting to change. How are you handling the stresses of having your children, or your children growing up, or you're in a different stage in your career, or your relationship is changing? All of those things are different. And then you add on top of that the technology that we have right now, which makes us constantly in a stress response. So if you're with somebody and I'm like, here is somebody new, and I'm like hearing this dinging, I'm like, what is going on? They're like, oh, it's my notifications. And there's news alerts, and and this constant barrage. So every time the phone dings, that is like a jolt of stress hormones.
Yeah, it really is. It drives me nuts. I just actually got a new phone like a week and a half ago, and one of the first things I do is I go through and I start turning all the notifications off. I'm like, just
Right.
stop. I can't handle it.
Exactly. It's and that has to be a conscious decision, because I think the default is that they come, right? And the
Yeah.
default is that there are going to be sounds, and so it has to be a conscious choice. And this happened to me, and it was so ironic because I was at a meditation retreat. I can tell you exactly when this was. It was in 2011, and I was on a meditation retreat, and I had my phone for time and whatever. And like, in retrospect, I probably just would have had the phone off and just had a watch or whatever. And so I woke up, and there was a notification about a mass shooting. And I was in the middle of this meditation retreat, and I was like, my heart
Yeah.
was sick about it. And I was like, there's nothing, I didn't, and how do I want to say this? Like, I'm not going to be any better for anybody else knowing this information right now
Mhm,
than I
mhm.
would have tomorrow or the next day. And there are ways that we feel like we have to be on top of everything. But what I teach now is like, is there anything that you need to know before you go to sleep? Like, is there anything in the world that you need to know about right now that you can't wait until the morning to find out?
Yeah.
Because if there isn't, you're going to get a very different night's sleep than if you're watching the news or reading the news or scrolling before you go to sleep. And sleep is everything, because if our stress hormones are high, we're not going to get a good night's sleep.
Yeah, and I think it's so interesting too that this attachment that so many of us have to the news cycles, politics, whatever. I feel like that there's this weird feedback that we get a dopamine, even though it's stressful and it doesn't really make us feel good. We get this weird dopamine hit, from just like hearing the notification, checking what it is, and like mm, pseudo being connected, even though I don't think that makes us any more connected in or present in our actual lives.
Right.
And so one of the best things that I did for myself a long time ago was disconnect from the news. So like, I don't watch the news. I'll read some headlines just to stay, informed. And if it's something I'm interested in, then I have the choice to read more if I want. But again, like no notifications on the phone, like we don't have cable, so I don't even have the option to watch that 24-hour news cycle anymore, thank goodness. And it really has, lifted this veil of sort of like constant stress that I didn't really realize. I was so used to it that I didn't really realize it was there until I got rid of it.
It's so true. It's so true. And I have a friend, actually I met her through yoga, and she's an attorney. And so she does a daily, basically a daily politics update. And I recognized that I was listening to that, and I first moved to Southern California 8 years ago, and it was the time that I was listening to that, and she was doing it Eastern time, and I was listening first thing in the morning while I was walking by the beach. This is not why I moved here, to be getting agitated while I'm walking by the beach. So
Right.
unless we're really present, we're not going to notice that. And it's just in the background. Like, for people, and sometimes it's not you, it's your spouse or your children, where the TV is on all the time with the news, and it's just that low level of going into, and it's the outer world dictating how your inner world is starting. So it's the same like how are you going to sleep? Are you intentionally deciding how you're going to sleep, or is the outer world? And the same thing in the morning. Are you present with who you are with in the morning and yourself, and grateful to be alive for another day, and have the food you need and the bed that you slept in and all those things? Or is the first thing something that's really outside of yourself?
Right, because the news isn't there to tell us what's happy and going right in the world, So, yeah, like if and again, personally for me, when I was finally like ready to dig in and say like, how can I be happier on a more consistent basis?
Yes,
It was that dialogue of, I don't need to hear this dialogue every day of everything that's going wrong that I can't do anything about. Like there is like it's not empowering at all. So
exactly.
so that's the other thing too, is like I know that I can get involved in the issues that I'm passionate about, but I don't need all the other noise out there too. So I think, if people out there do want to maybe find that balance, it's okay, get involved in an issue that you care about, and that can be empowering. But just the constant of the, like you said, the outside world dictating to you what you're thinking about it,
Exactly.
and how you're quote unquote supposed to think or perceive something. Yeah, no thanks.
Yeah. So all of this to say is that all these things we just talked about puts us in a state of stress response,
Yeah.
which is fight or flight, which is, fight, flee, or freeze. And all of these things where we just get so stuck, or we're so ramped up, and you can feel it in your breath. And if we're in a constant state of fight or flight, your breath is going to be shallow, and that's going to impact your nervous system. And
Mhm.
the old adage, just take a deep breath, is 100% true. It's 100% true. It will change your nervous system. It will change your physiology. It will change your thoughts in a breath, and everything starts to look a little bit differently. I I notice it all the time when I'm driving, that I'm kind of holding my breath, and I live in New York City, so I haven't been driving every day for most of my life, and it's more, but still, and I'll notice it, and I just have to, take it, because even like how you're driving is affected. So imagine you're in this constant state of stress, and there are stress hormones as well as your sex hormones. So as you know, all that's going to impact everything: how we're digesting, how we're assimilating, our emotions, how we're thinking. So it's very much the physical, emotional, and mental symptoms of perimenopause that are causing women a lot of discomfort, a lot of unhappiness, a lot of disconnection. It also has to do with the changing the time of your life and all of those emotions that come in with it. But what I like to say is also putting it into perspective. So if it was just hormones, so every woman has hormones, right? Then it wouldn't be a cultural, then every woman in every culture would have similar symptoms or similar amounts of symptoms. And it's just not the case, because women in other cultures, especially in Asian cultures, they don't even have a word for hot flash in certain Asian languages. It doesn't exist because those are not happening in women. And from an Ayurveda perspective, which is very much about the elements,
Mhm.
hot flashes and night sweats are about excess heat and excess fire in the body. We have all these different expressions. Somebody's hot-headed, they're have heartburn, they have a fiery temper. So all these things that get out of balance for anybody that is getting hot, there's a lot of emotion underneath that. I was just working with a client, and I've been working with her for about 3 months now. She's doing great. And we started talking about something that was happening and in her life. And she was like, hang on, I have to go get my fan. She had been sitting there for 15 minutes. Nothing had changed she wasn't like running around. She was sitting in the same place. It was what we were talking about that was making her heat. So learning how to respond even to those thoughts can
Mhm.
be the difference between an overwhelming day spoiling hot flash and being like, okay, I can be present with this. And this is what's happening. My life is not out of control. I can just come back to a breath. And of course, there's so much more to it. And I've already been working with her, but within a couple of minutes, she was fine. And then, but she was able to observe it like a half hour later that it was happening again. And she had never made that connection about emotions and thoughts and the heat in her body and hot flashes.
For sure. I think the first step to any change is awareness. And if we can then move from awareness into what I like to call it the objective detective,
Love that.
so that we can evaluate our thoughts or our behavior or our reaction to something from a non-judgmental place and just get curious. Okay, like what else is going on? Why would I react that way? Or why would I automatically assume, which is a thought, this about this situation or this person or, or their behavior, for example. And then, because again, that gives us power to make a different choice. And, so the next time that we're triggered or something comes up that would normally maybe set us off, maybe this time it doesn't, because we're able to within that awareness and mindfulness go, oh, here's that opportunity. And here's my chance to not do whatever I did last time or to shift it in a little bit different way or, anything like that.
Yeah, that's the power of awareness, and that's the power of being quiet, even if it's just for a few minutes,
Mm-hmm.
because and it can be frightening if you never stop and you're never stopping talking or listening or watching or consuming. It can be really scary to sit and be with yourself and your thoughts. But in that moment, which might become 5 minutes or 10 minutes, you can kind of see like, these are thoughts that I'm having. These are the thoughts that I'm living in. And if I'm living in those thoughts and that reality, that those flood of stress hormones are causing all these symptoms in my body and so many more that I don't even know about that are going even deeper. So menopause can also be perimenopause, especially when the symptoms begin, can also be a time of reevaluation. Like I say that all of these are messages that the body is sending. If we don't listen, the messages are going to get louder and louder.
Mm-hmm.
If we suppress the symptoms by something that's outside ourselves, we're not going to have that opportunity to really learn from that. So deciding like, hey, I'm at this point, most likely halfway, if not more than halfway through my life at a lifespan, that's expected. But how do I want the rest of my life to be? And if I'm not feeling well and I'm always tired and I'm in a bad mood and I'm irritable and I can't think straight, what is the next half of my life going to look like
Mm-hmm.
without really addressing those so that you can feel good? And I always say, like, what about the other people in your life? They want they want you to be happy. They want you to be healthy. And that requires taking a look at ourselves and saying, this is what I need. Because it can be so hard for women to take care of themselves. It's just for as nurturers, that's what we do. But ultimately, this idea of without looking at ourselves, everyone else is going to be impacted as well.
Mhm. So, what can we do in terms of habits and routines to sort of start or get to the place that we want to be?
Well, thank you. And there are a lot of things, and they don't have to be complicated. They can be super simple. There has to be a reason that's bigger than yourself. And for most women, it's their family. And so this woman that I was talking about previously, she knows she's not like as much fun to be with her husband. And she's like, he's not having fun. We're not having fun anymore. And her family isn't getting the best version of herself. So saying, this is who I want to be for as long as many days as I have. So like really making that decision, because if it's kind of like, well, I'll try, and being so caught up in your life that you don't have a chance to reflect. So it's it's really a conscious decision, I believe. And anybody who's chosen to listen to the wisdom that you have and the guests that you have, you're already curious. You're already curious, which is so great. So starting with that and saying, I can decide at any time, and I want to decide now, like, why wait? So I think we really, spoke about this awareness. Like, I call it, symptom solving. Like, where has all this started? Okay, you've got these hot flashes. Like, let's look at those hot flashes. What did you call it? Being a detective?
Objective detective.
I love that. Can I borrow that?
Yes.
I will totally give you credit. That's exactly right. Like, okay, you're waking up 5 times a night, one night, and the next night you're not waking up at all. What was different? What was different about the day you had? What was the different about what you ate? The conversations that you have. So we're being an objective detective about this. The body leaves clues. It gives us information, and it's not haphazard. Like, it's just not. And so when we can start to see those things, that gives us clues about what's happening. And to be able to be willing to let go of what you don't know, because there's so much information out there,
Mhm.
and it's confusing, and it's not always correct, and it can lead us on the wrong path. And we want to be really careful about jumping into doing anything before we look at ourselves first, and how we're sleeping, how we're living. When you hear that piece of news come in, what are you doing? Are you going, are you pausing and taking a deep breath from your belly, keeping your body out of the stress response? Because that's really going to change everything. So I always like to start with sleep. And the reason for that is because if we're not sleeping well, everything else is going to be off. Our hunger level is going to be off. Our weight's going to be affected, certainly our mood and our focus. So for a lot of women, they're tired all the time. They might not be looking at a pattern of sleep. And in Ayurveda, again, that's the science or knowledge of life. We love routines. We love patterns, because the body is kind of like a clock. It really is. And if we're very much in tune to nature, we can follow that clock too. So from a daily perspective, the sun rises, it's hottest in the middle of the day, and then it gets dark and we wind down. So if we're not in tune with that, and we're not going to sleep, and we're not eating till it's well after dark, if you're not eating till 10 o'clock at night, and then you're going to sleep, you're not going to get as restful a night's sleep as if you're eating when it's light out. And so again, with the and tell me if this is going into too much detail about Ayurveda.
No, I love it. This
Okay.
is exactly what I wanted. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, because this is I always use this. I mean, when I just want to say to everyone who's listening, when I learned about Ayurveda, the world made sense to me.
Mhm.
All of a sudden, the world made sense to me. So we've got these 5 elements in the world, right? So fire, we need fire in our body. We need it to be balanced. We need it to digest. So we call it the fire of digestion. If there's too much fire, what happens? We get acid reflux. We get heartburn. And if there's not enough, we get sluggish, and that's when we get constipated. So we need enough fire, but not too much. If we don't have enough fire in our digestion, if it's too late or we're eating an inappropriate or not ideal combination of food, our digestion is not going to be, it's not going to be optimal. And the problem with that is that everything starts with digestion. Think about it. The food that grows in the ground, or the animal that ate the food, we eat that. The plants, the animals that ate the plants, we eat that. And that becomes our body. It becomes our body. It becomes our thoughts. It's so important. So,
Mm-hmm.
but when we eat is just as important as what we eat. So we want to eat at a time where there's plenty of fire to digest our food. And that's going to be in the middle of the day. And so having a larger meal when the sun is higher in the sky, because we reflect nature's rhythms. Does that make sense?
Oh, for sure.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when we do that and we have a bigger meal in the middle of the day, we're going to be able to digest, absorb, assimilate. If we eat that same meal that we eat at 12 or 1 o'clock at 7 or 8 or 9 o'clock, we're not going to benefit as much from that food, and it's going to affect our sleep. So there's always this idea, well, wait, eat 3 hours before you go to sleep. Well, that's great. But if you're eating at 9 o'clock and going to bed at midnight, that's not as great. So when we're eating, that is going to affect how our body's functioning. It's going to affect our hot flashes. It's going to affect our sleep. And without a good night's sleep, there's this vicious cycle of everything that's going on. Then we don't sleep well. Then we're going to get hungrier and we're going to eat and we're not going to be paying as much attention. So it starts with this awareness about how we're living in the world in a very simple way. And when I learned that, and I learned about food and that we want to be able to digest and rest, that made all the difference for me. And that's really what got me off the IBS train completely, was only eating 2 or 3 times a day.
Right. And no
And
snacking. Yeah.
not
Not snacking. Yeah.
Because if your body is constantly digesting, it's doing way too much work. It's confused. I like thinking like my body's confused. My stomach's confused. What are you doing to me? Like I get to decide what's gonna go in or go out. And that also, and I wasn't really in perimenopause when I started all this. I mean, who knows? But I used to be hot a lot, no matter what the season was. And I was eating all the time. I always had my, because I ran around as a yoga teacher for a long time. So I always had my almonds with me, and I was like kind of always eating, always grazing.
Great.
And that's the worst thing that you can do for your hot flashes, because then your body is constantly digesting. If you're digesting when you're sleeping, you're going to have a hot flash, and your sleep is not going to be as deep. So it's not just the hours that you're sleeping, it's the quality of your sleep. So Can I expand upon any of that for you?
No, I would just maybe piggyback onto that a little bit by saying one of the things that worked for me when I was first trying to figure out my sleep hygiene, and I will also want to say that yes, we give you suggestions and guidelines, but this is very much unique to what works for you. So there are some skeleton parameters that we want you to be hitting. But like you said, even if you're getting 8 hours, if it's not good quality, then it's not going to be restorative. So we want to help you to have the most restorative sleep possible. So for me, that actually started by starting with how I wanted the beginning of my day to feel and then working backwards from that. And I know it might sound a little like it's a reverse engineering, or as my mother would say, bass backwards.
Well, I'm just going to stop you 1 second, because I say a good night's sleep starts in the morning. So go ahead.
Yeah. And because I was a person that hated getting up in the morning, and, and I had a job where I had to be at work by 7 a.m. and I lived about an hour away. And so for the longest time, it would be the rush, 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 rush. I didn't eat anything. If I did, it would be in my car on the way to work. And I knew that just wasn't sustainable. I wasn't happy. So I said, okay, what can I do to change this? Well, I like to work out or do yoga and first thing in the morning. That means I have to allow time for that. So, okay, well, what time do I have to, just like work it backwards. What time do I need to be here? How much time am I going to dedicate to that movement in the morning? What else needs to happen in the morning before I leave? Okay, that means I need to get up at this time. That means I have to go to bed at, just counting backwards. And then also, too, being mindful of, okay, well, if this is bedtime, how long will it take my body to wind down to be sleepy? Because that's, I think, another thing that we don't really think about. We think bedtime, get in bed, go to sleep, but most of us aren't sleepy right away. And so then we watch TV or we browse our phones or whatever it is that is blue light that just kills our serotonin production and melatonin production, which then interrupts our sleep cycle. So those are the things that I would say, that are like, that helped me in terms of structure and the planning and the figuring it all out. And then, just tweaking and fine tuning from there.
I love that. And the way that you did it was ideal, because not only did you think about how much time you would need in the morning, you also pushed back your bedtime, because it's always easier to go to sleep a little. I mean, for your body, it's going to be easier to go to sleep a little earlier than it will be to get up earlier, because that's always going to be hard for the body. And I always also talk about mini increments. Like, I'm talking about little choices, like 10 minutes less of the phone, like not these big drastic things where
Right.
your life is going to seem like, oh my God, what did I do? They've got to be gradual, because we know cold turkey doesn't work. We know it doesn't work. But what I like to do is have people feel better quickly, so that they get these, little ideas like, wow, this is really possible. And then maybe I can do this. Maybe I feel so much better now that I just changed this one thing. What else can I do? How else can I add on to that? And it's also very empowering when it's a change that you're making that doesn't, and I'm not against what I honor any choice that anybody makes. But if you are relying on something that you're taking, that you're putting in your body, and that's helping you feel better, that's great. But there's an empowerment when it's a change that you're making and not relying on something that's going into your body.
Mm-hmm. You're talking like a sleep aid, I guess.
I'm talking about a sleep aid. I'm talking about an RX. I'm talking about an HRT. If those are working for you and you want to continue that, great. You can also start to make a change that's going to help with your stress level. And those will be, so for a lot of women, for many women, it's either or. They're like, well, I'm just going to do this and that's it. I'm just going to decide to take something. I'm going to decide to take an aid. But if you're just doing that and not making any other changes in your routines, it can only go so far. So any of the things that we're talking about are just going to help you along the way, because this is a reflection of how these symptoms are a reflection of how your body is functioning. And it's not optimal. And we know that people can go through perimenopause and menopause without any issues at all. And it doesn't have to be miserable. It is about choosing, and I talk about women's agency. Like, a lot of women are not getting the answers that they're looking for, and it's very disempowering. But there are so many things that we can do as women, that we don't have to be, beholden to an aid. We don't have to be beholden to somebody saying, well, there's nothing that you really can do, just bear, just grin and bear it. And so, no, there are so many things I can do. I have my body. I'm doing things every day already. What is one little thing that I can do that can help?
Yeah. And I will say too, by reevaluating that whole bedtime and awake routine, and I went through an Ayurvedic protocol with a local practitioner, I was able to release caffeine. So caffeine can go into that bucket too of something that we put into our bodies as an aid for sure. And I mean, I still love coffee, don't get me wrong, but now I'm a decaf or half calf drinker if I have it at all. And when I have it, it's because I just enjoy coffee, not because I need that, hit of caffeine to get me going. So that was such a big shift for me. And I know it helped my adrenals and my hormone balance. So that's a big key. If there are any of you out there that feel like you're a slave to your caffeine, you don't have to be. There is another side to the coin.
There is. And for people who say, well, I don't drink caffeine after 12 p.m. or 3 p.m. or it doesn't matter. It's still in your system, and it is creating something. And if you're having hot flashes, night sweats, caffeine is not your friend. It is not your friend. And there's a lot of attachment that comes with caffeine. And I'm just curious for you, did you go off it gradually, and what was that like for you?
So I was working with a practitioner, and she's a panchakarma specialist, and so we were planning for sort of the week-long panchakarma at her retreat facility. And so I started tapering myself off about 2 weeks before. So, but we had already worked together for 2 weeks before that. So we had a 4-week container prior to
Nice.
start implementing, things like oil pulling, tongue scraping, hot water with ghee in the morning, those types of things, which prime the body, is from what I understand. And so by the time it came to the week of panchakarma, I was no more caffeine. So
Wow. I really want to acknowledge you. That is not easy. That is not easy, but I've seen so many people come out the other side. And if you're listening to this, like, what's interesting about the coffee is often the ritual. And one of the first students, I used to do Ayurveda detoxes, cleanses. And she was a longtime yoga student of mine at that point. And she decided to go cold turkey, which I had not recommended, and I do not recommend, but that's what she chose. It did not go well. And so when she was finally feeling better, she said, well, I guess I feel better. And I was like, well, what is it about the coffee? She said, I've been making coffee for my husband every day for 15 years. So that's what it's about. It's not, you can love the taste and all those other things. There's warmth that you can get from so many other drinks. It was about the ritual. It was about the ritual. And I was like, can you still make your husband coffee and have yourself some other beverage? And she was like, of course. So there are things that we can question when we know that it's for the greatest good. And I just got an email from her, and again, that was like 13 years ago. There was another story I told about the meditation retreat, and she's doing great. She's doing great. And at that time it was 15 years, and now her daughter's like 26 or something. So
yeah. So before we start to wrap up, are there any other routines or habits that just pop to front of mind that we want to infuse here? Or do we feel like focusing on the sleep and the morning routine was enough?
Well, on top of the morning routine,
Yeah.
Waking up and taking a few deep breaths, acknowledging your surroundings, seeing if you can be present with what's amazing, with who's next to you, with who else is around you, before the day has begun, before you've even opened your eyes, because just that one pause can change everything. And some people will say to me that they feel anxious when they get up because there's so much that they have to do. But just by taking that minute in bed, that minute or two in bed, and just being, some of that anxiety can be diminished a little bit, because then you're like, well, I've got it. Like, that's going to be handled. I've got it.
Yes, I love that. So true too. Before Wayne Dyer passed, I was listening to one of his workshops or lectures or something, and he mentioned that he has like a self-love and gratitude practice before he even opens his eyes, and just, says, I love you. I love, over and over and over to himself before he ever gets out of bed. And I thought that was so beautiful. And it's something I still practice today. And it is, at first you might feel like it's cheesy or corny or silly, but ultimately you really start to bask in that love and appreciation. And it really does change the whole tone, at least for your morning. unless it's easy for some of us to get thrown out of it. But, it's not about being perfect. It's how quickly we come back, right?
Exactly. And it's never going to be perfect. It wasn't for him, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And it's just those little moments of choice that we can, and I say that every choice that we make is either moving us towards optimal health, optimal living, or away from it. So when we start to become more present, those choices become more clear. Whether it's, are we picking up the phone? Is that moving me towards or away from where I want to be? Whether you're choosing to stay up and watching another episode of XYZ, like all of those little things. And again, when we're not feeling well, it's so hard to do those things. It's really
Right.
can be so hard. We're depressed, we're exhausted, we don't like the way we look when we're in the mirror. But it's one small step at a time. And I love working with women who are in this period of their lives. I'm more on the end of that. So I know what it's like to go through it and see so many of my clients. So I love focusing on that right now.
Well, tell everyone where they can find you and how they can work with you, please.
Thank you so much. Well, I have, I call my method the peri-cycle lift, and we really look at everything that's going on in your life and how you are managing the pressures of life. So I work with women, work with them anywhere in the world. We go through a series of series of phases within where we're uncovering what the symptoms are. We're looking at mindset, and then we're looking at how to take all this out into your life in the next phase of your life. So my website is marjorienass.com. Everything is marjorienass.com. That my website's being updated as we speak, and that should be out, and I'll have lots of new good things that are coming out there.
Well, cool. Definitely keep us posted because we can always add those resources to the show notes page.
Yeah.
So everybody go check out marjorienass.com. And, I'm sure there's a myriad of ways that she can add to your life and help bring it up a notch at minimum, if not to a whole new incarnation.
Thank you so much. I love looking at it like that. And things are changing. Like the world can be very different for women who are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, beyond. And everything that we learn together are still things that you can apply for however long you are living in your body. And that's what I call aging. How long have you lived in your body?
Yes. All right. So to find the show notes and to find all the links and everything we spoke about today, head on over to drlaramay.com/podcasts. That's where all the show notes live. So if you listen to an episode and you're not in a space where you can write something down, don't worry. We've written it down for you. So just run over there. And as always, if you feel so inclined, like, comment, set your notifications for when we, release a new episode so you don't miss one. Thank you, everybody, and we'll catch you on the next episode.